Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. I've been driving long haul for about 12 years now. Mostly I run routes through the Midwest and down into the Deep South, taking goods from one distribution center to another. The money's decent, the solitude suits me, and after my divorce, I didn't mind spending weeks at a time on the road. You see things out there that most people don't. You learn that America at 3 in the morning is a different country entirely. This happened last October on a stretch of Highway 82 in Mississippi. If you've never driven through that part of the state, it's mostly pine forests, swampland, and small towns that look like time forgot them somewhere around 1987. The kind of places where the gas station hasn't updated its sign in decades and everyone knows everyone else's business. I'd left Memphis around 9 at night, hauling refrigerated goods down to Mobile. The load was time-sensitive, and I was running a bit behind schedule because of a delay at the warehouse. My dispatcher had been writing me about it, so I was pushing to make up time. The highway was empty that night, not unusual for that route at that hour. But still, there's something about driving through complete darkness with nothing but your headlights and the white line on the road. It gets into your head after a while. Around 2:30 in the morning, I was maybe 40 miles outside of Columbus, Mississippi. The radio had lost its signal about 20 minutes back, so I was driving in silence except for the rumble of my engine and the hum of the refrigeration unit. That's when I saw her. She was standing right at mile marker 47, just off the shoulder of the road. A woman in a white dress, her arm outstretched like she was trying to flag someone down. My headlights caught her for maybe 3 seconds as I approached, and I got a clear look at her face. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with dark hair that hung past her shoulders. Her dress looked old-fashioned, like something from a different era. But what struck me most was her expression. She wasn't panicked or desperate like you'd expect from someone stranded on a deserted highway in the middle of the night. She was just standing there, perfectly still, with this blank look on her face. I should mention that I don't usually stop for hitchhikers. Company policy strictly forbids it, and after years on the road, you develop a healthy paranoia about strangers. But something about seeing a woman alone out there bothered me. This wasn't near any town or rest stop. There were no broken-down vehicles visible, nothing to explain why she'd be standing there. I passed her and continued for about a quarter mile, but my conscience got the better of me. What if she was in real trouble? What if something had happened and she needed help? I slowed down and pulled onto the shoulder, planning to back up to where she was standing. That's when I checked my side mirror. The road behind me was completely empty. The woman was gone. I sat there for a moment, engine idling, trying to make sense of it. There was nowhere she could have gone that quickly. The forest came right up to the edge of the road on both sides, thick and dark, but she would have had to move impossibly fast to disappear into it in the few seconds since I'd passed her. I put the truck in a park and grabbed my flashlight from the passenger seat. I know it sounds stupid, but I had to check. I stepped out into the humid night air, and immediately I could smell the rot of the swamp mixed with pine. The cicadas were screaming in the trees, so loud it was almost painful. I walked back along the shoulder, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. When I reached mile marker 47, there was no sign of her. No footprints in the soft dirt at the edge of the road. No broken branches in the tree line. Nothing. I stood there, sweeping my flashlight back and forth, calling out to ask if anyone was there, if anyone needed help. My voice sounded small and strange in that vast darkness. That's when I noticed something carved into the mile marker post. I'd driven past thousands of these posts over the years, never paid them much attention, but this one had words scratched into the metal. I had to get close with my flashlight to read them. The letters were crude, carved with something sharp, and they looked old, the metal around them rusted. It said, She waits for you." The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I turned in a slow circle, shining my light into the trees, half expecting to see that woman in white standing just inside the tree line, watching me. But there was nothing. Just darkness and those screaming cicadas. I walked back to my truck faster than I'd like to admit and climbed into the cab. My hands were shaking as I put it in gear and pulled back onto the highway. I told myself it was just some local legend, some story that kids told each other to scare themselves. Small towns in the South are full of ghost stories. Every stretch of lonely road has its phantom hitchhiker. But I couldn't shake the image of her face, that blank, expressionless stare. I made it to Mobile by dawn and unloaded my cargo without incident. I didn't mention what I'd seen to anyone at the distribution center. What would I say? That I'd seen a ghost? That I'd stopped on a deserted highway and found a cryptic message carved into a mile marker? They'd think the isolation was getting to me. I tried to forget about it. I took another load heading back north, a different route that kept me on I-59 instead of Highway 82. I told myself I'd just been tired, that my eyes had played tricks on me in the dark. But about a week later, I was in a truck stop outside Hattiesburg, and I got talking to another driver named Marcus. He'd been running southern routes even longer than I had, knew every back road and shortcut from Texas to the Carolinas. I don't know what made me bring it up, but I mentioned Highway 82 and asked if he'd ever seen anything strange out there. The way his face changed told me everything I needed to know. He leaned in close, his voice dropping low even though the diner was mostly empty. He told me about the woman in white at mile marker 47. He said drivers had been seeing her for decades. Some said she was a woman who died in a car accident there in the 50s, killed by a drunk driver while she was walking home from a dance. Others said she was murdered, dumped in the swamp by someone she trusted. The stories varied, but the sightings were always the same. A woman in a white dress, standing perfectly still, trying to flag down passing vehicles. Marcus said he'd seen her himself, twice, over the years he'd been driving that route. Both times at night, both times near that same mile marker. He'd stopped the first time, just like I had, and found nothing. The second time he just kept driving. Then he told me something that made my blood run cold. He said that a few drivers who stopped for her never made it to their destinations. Their trucks were found abandoned on the shoulder near mile marker 47, engines still running, cargo intact, but the drivers were gone. No signs of struggle, no evidence of foul play, just gone. He looked at me with this dead serious expression and said, "You stopped, didn't you? You went back to look for her." I didn't answer, but he could see it in my face. He nodded slowly. "Then you need to listen to me. Don't drive that route at night anymore. And if you ever see her again, anywhere, on any road, don't stop. Don't even slow down. Just keep driving." I haven't taken a load on Highway 82 since then. I request different routes even if they're longer, even if it means less money. My dispatcher thinks I'm being difficult, but I don't care. Because 3 nights ago, I was driving through Alabama on Highway 80, a road I've driven hundreds of times. It was around 2 in the morning, and I was making good time. The highway was empty, just like always at that hour. That's when I saw her again. She was standing on the shoulder, that same white dress, that same blank expression, but this time she wasn't at mile marker 47 in Mississippi. She was 3 states away, on a road she had no business being on. And this time, when I passed her and checked my mirror, she was still there, standing perfectly still in the red glow of my taillights, watching me drive away. I pressed the accelerator to the floor and didn't let up until I crossed the state line into Georgia. I don't know what she is or what she wants, but Marcus was right about one thing. She's not just at mile marker 47 anymore. She's following me. If you drive long haul, you get to know the rest stops along your regular routes like the back of your hand. You learn which ones have the cleanest bathrooms, which ones have the best vending machines, and which ones you should avoid after dark. There's this unofficial knowledge that gets passed between drivers, little warnings and recommendations that never get written down anywhere, but everyone seems to know. Rest Stop 9 on I-40 in eastern Tennessee was one that most drivers avoided at night. It sat about 30 miles outside of Knoxville, tucked back in the mountains where the highway curved through dense forest. During the day it was fine, normal even. Families with kids, tourists in RVs, the occasional motorcycle gang passing through. But at night, something about that place felt wrong. I'd stopped there a handful of times over the years, always during daylight hours, and never thought much about it. It was just another rest area with the usual facilities, some picnic tables, a couple of vending machines, and a dog walking area. Nothing remarkable. But this past February, I learned why drivers avoided it after sunset. I was coming back from a delivery in Nashville, heading northeast toward Virginia. The run had taken longer than expected because of weather delays, and by the time I hit eastern Tennessee, it was pushing midnight. I'd been driving for nearly 11 hours straight, and I could feel the fatigue settling into my bones. My eyes were getting heavy, and I was having that dangerous moment where you catch yourself drifting. I needed to pull over. Company regulations are strict about driving hours, and I was already pushing the limit. More importantly, I knew myself well enough to know when I was becoming a danger on the road. I started watching for a place to stop. Rest Stop 9 appeared on one of those big green highway signs, 5 miles ahead. I hadn't planned on stopping there, but at that point I didn't have much choice. The next rest area was another 40 miles, and I wasn't sure I could make it that far safely. I took the exit and followed the winding access road back into the trees. The rest stop was completely empty when I pulled in. The overhead lights in the parking area were working, but they had that harsh sodium glow that makes everything look jaundiced and surreal. There were spaces for maybe 20 vehicles, but mine was the only one there. The main building, a simple brick structure with restrooms and vending machines, sat dark and silent. I parked my rig in one of the truck spaces at the far end of the lot, near the tree line. I sat there for a moment with the engine running, just taking in the scene. Something about the emptiness of the place bothered me. Even late at night, you usually see at least 1 or 2 other vehicles at rest stops along major interstates, but this place was deserted. I checked my phone. No signal, which wasn't surprising given how far back in the mountains we were. I made a mental note of the time, just after midnight, and decided I'd sleep for a few hours, then get back on the road. I wasn't planning on leaving the cab. I had a sleeper berth that was more comfortable than most motel beds, and I'd learned long ago to sleep through just about anything. I shut down the engine, and the sudden silence was profound. No traffic noise from the highway, no sounds of other vehicles or people. Just the tick of my engine cooling and the wind moving through the trees. I climbed into the back, set an alarm on my phone for 4 a.m., and settled in to sleep. I don't know how long I'd been asleep when the knocking started. It was soft at first, almost tentative. 3 slow knocks on the side of my trailer. Tap, tap, tap. I opened my eyes, disoriented in the darkness of the sleeper berth. For a moment, I thought I'd dreamed it. Then it came again. 3 knocks, a bit louder this time, but still measured and deliberate. They were coming from the passenger side of the trailer, maybe 20 feet behind the cab. My first thought was that another driver had pulled in and needed help. Maybe they'd broken down or had an emergency. I sat up, trying to shake off the grogginess, and reached for my jacket. The knocking came again. Same rhythm, 3 measured strikes, but this time it was closer. It had moved forward along the trailer toward the cab. Something about that movement bothered me. There was something deliberate about it, something that didn't feel like someone genuinely asking for help. I stayed quiet, listening. The knocking continued. 3 strikes, then a pause, then 3 more strikes, each set moving progressively closer. It was like someone was walking alongside my truck, knocking every few feet, but I hadn't heard any footsteps, hadn't heard a vehicle pull up. I moved quietly to the passenger side window and peered out through the curtain. The parking lot was still empty. The harsh overhead lights illuminated every space clearly. There was no one outside my truck. No person, no vehicle, nothing that could explain the knocking. But even as I watched, I heard it again. 3 knocks, now on the cab itself, right below where I was looking. My heart started pounding. I pulled back from the window, my mind racing through possibilities. Was someone crouched down below my sight line? Was this some kind of prank that drivers pulled on each other? But that didn't make sense. There were no other vehicles here. I would have heard someone approach. The knocking moved to the driver's side. 3 measured strikes on the door of the cab. Then silence. I sat frozen, barely breathing, waiting to see what would happen next. Minutes passed. The wind moved through the trees with a sound like rushing water. An owl called somewhere in the darkness, but no more knocking. I was just starting to convince myself that it had stopped when I heard it again. But this time, it wasn't coming from outside the truck. It was coming from the trailer. 3 slow knocks from inside the cargo area, as if someone was trapped back there, trying to get out. My blood went cold. I knew for a fact that trailer was empty. I'd unloaded the last of my cargo in Nashville and hadn't picked up another load yet. I'd done the post-trip inspection myself, walked through the entire trailer with a flashlight to make sure everything was secure and empty before I closed it up. There was no one in there. There couldn't be. The knocking came again, still from inside the trailer. 3 strikes, then a pause. Then 3 more, moving forward through the cargo space toward the cab. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands. Still no signal. I was completely alone out here with no way to call for help. My keys were in the ignition, and I had a brief, wild thought about just starting the engine and driving away immediately. But something stopped me. Some instinct told me that running while whatever this was remained in my trailer would be worse. Instead, I pulled on my boots and jacket. I grabbed the heavy maglite flashlight I kept in the cab, the metal one that could double as a weapon if needed. Then I sat there, listening to the knocking continue its progression through my empty trailer. When it reached the front wall of the cargo area, the wall that separated the trailer from the cab, it stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the knocking had been. I could feel something on the other side of that metal wall, could sense a presence waiting there. Then came a new sound, a dragging, scratching noise, like fingernails on metal. It started at the bottom of the separating wall and slowly moved upward. Whatever was making the sound was either very tall or climbing. I don't know what made me do it, but I reached forward and pounded on my side of the wall with my fist. 3 times. Hard. The scratching stopped immediately. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, from the other side of the wall, something pounded back. 3 thunderous strikes that shook the entire cab. They were so loud, so impossibly forceful, that I couldn't imagine what could have made them. It sounded like someone had taken a sledgehammer to the metal. I didn't wait to hear more. I fired up the engine, threw the truck into gear, and pulled out of that parking space so fast I nearly jackknifed the trailer. I didn't care about proper procedure or taking my time. I just needed to get out of Rest Stop 9. As I swung around toward the exit, my headlights swept across the rest area building. For just a moment, I saw something standing in front of the darkened restrooms. A figure, tall and thin, impossibly thin, with arms that hung down past its knees. It was too far away, and I was moving too fast to get a clear look, but I saw it raise one of those long arms in what might have been a wave. I gunned the engine and didn't slow down until I was back on the interstate, surrounded by other vehicles and lights and the normal noise of traffic. I drove straight through to Virginia without stopping again. When I finally pulled into a truck stop outside Roanoke, the sun was coming up. I did a full inspection of my trailer, inside and out, in broad daylight. There was nothing unusual. No signs of forced entry, no damage to the walls or door. But on the inside of the front wall, the one that separated the cargo area from the cab, I found something that made my hands shake. Scratches, deep gouges in the metal, as if something with claws had tried to tear through. They formed a pattern, 3 vertical lines, repeated over and over, covering the entire surface of the wall. I don't take loads that route anymore, and I never, ever stop at Rest Stop 9. But sometimes, late at night when I'm parked and trying to sleep, I hear it again. 3 soft knocks on the side of my trailer. Just testing, just waiting. Every trucker uses a CB radio. It's how we communicate with each other, share information about road conditions, warn about speed traps, or just pass the time with some conversation during those long, empty stretches. There's a culture to it, an etiquette. You learn the channels, the common handles people use, the way conversations flow. Channel 19 is the main one, where most of the general chatter happens. After you've been driving for a while, you start to recognize voices. There are guys who run the same routes at the same times, and you end up having regular conversations without ever meeting face to face. It's one of the things I actually enjoy about the job, that sense of invisible community spread out across the highways. But last spring, I had a CB conversation that I can't explain. One that still makes me question what actually happened that night. I was running a route from Oklahoma City up to Wichita, Kansas. It was late April, and the weather had been strange all week. Tornado warnings on and off, the sky taking on those weird greenish-gray colors that mean serious storms are forming. I'd been monitoring the weather closely, ready to pull over if things got dangerous. I left Oklahoma City around 7 in the evening, planning to drive through the night. The load wasn't time-sensitive, but I preferred night driving when the traffic was lighter. By the time I crossed into Kansas, it was past 10 and full dark. The storm clouds that had been threatening all the day had mostly cleared, leaving a clear sky full of stars. The highway was quiet. I passed the occasional vehicle, but for long stretches it was just me and the road. I had my CB on, listening to the occasional chatter on Channel 19, 2 drivers discussing diesel prices, someone warning about construction near Ponca City. The usual stuff. I was about 40 miles south of Wichita when a voice came through that I didn't recognize. "Northbound driver in the Freightliner, you copy?" I glanced at my radio. The voice was clear, no static, like whoever was speaking was close by, but something about it bothered me immediately. It was too flat, too emotionless, like someone reading from a script. I picked up the mic. "Yeah, I copy. This is Big Red heading north. What can I do for you?" There was a pause. Then, "You need to take exit 42 and head west." I frowned. Exit 42 was coming up in about 5 miles, but it led to nothing. I'd driven this route dozens of times. That exit went to some county roads that serviced farmland, maybe a few isolated houses. There was no reason for a truck to take it. "Negative on that," I responded. "I'm heading straight through to Wichita. Why would I take exit 42? Another pause, longer this time. Then the voice came back. "There's an accident on the highway ahead. Major pileup. Road's going to be closed for hours. You need to take exit 42 and use the county roads to get around it." I immediately switched channels and put out a call asking if anyone knew about an accident near Wichita. 2 drivers responded, both saying the road was clear as far as they knew. One of them had just passed through the area I was heading toward and reported no problems. I switched back to the original channel. "I'm getting reports the highway's clear. Where are you getting your information?" The flat voice responded immediately. "I'm trying to help you. Take exit 42. Go west. It's important." The insistence in those words, despite the emotionless delivery, sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't normal CB chatter. Something felt very wrong. "Who is this?" I asked. "What's your handle?" No response. I watched the mile markers passing, saw the sign for exit 42 approaching. I had no intention of taking it. Whatever this was, whoever was playing games on the CB, I wasn't interested. As I passed the exit and continued north, the voice came back. "You didn't take the exit." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, which meant whoever this was could see me. I checked all my mirrors, scanning the highway behind and beside me. There were no vehicles close enough to see whether I'd taken the exit. The nearest headlights were at least a quarter-mile back. "That's right, I didn't," I said into the mic, trying to keep my voice steady. "And I'm done with this conversation. Find someone else to mess with." I was reaching to turn off the CB when the voice came through again, and this time there was something different about it, an urgency that hadn't been there before. "You made a mistake. Look at your dash. Check your gauges." Despite myself, I looked down at my instrument panel. Everything appeared normal. Oil pressure good, engine temperature normal, fuel level steady. Nothing out of the ordinary. "Everything's fine," I said. "Nice try. Look closer." I glanced down again, and this time I noticed something I'd missed before. My temperature gauge was starting to climb. Not dramatically, but definitely higher than it had been a few minutes ago. As I watched, it crept further toward the red zone. My stomach tightened. An overheating engine was serious. If I didn't stop soon, I could blow the whole thing and be stranded on the side of the highway in the middle of nowhere. "There's a service station 5 miles ahead on the right," the voice said. "Small place. They close at 11, but if you hurry, you'll make it." I looked at my clock. It was 10:47. I watched my temperature gauge continue to climb and made a decision. I needed to stop, whether this mysterious CB contact was legitimate or not. "Roger that," I said. "I see the temp rising. I'll stop at the service station." "Good," the voice said. "That's good. When you get there, park away from the building. Don't go inside. Wait in your truck." "What? Why would I?" "Just trust me. Park away from the building and wait. Someone will come to help you." Before I could respond, I saw the service station ahead. It was exactly where the voice had said it would be, a small independent place with 2 old pumps and a garage bay. The lights were still on inside. I slowed down, signaling my turn, and pulled into the lot. My temperature gauge was now firmly in the red zone. Steam was starting to rise from under the hood. I did what the voice had told me. Instead of parking near the building, I pulled around to the far side of the lot, near a stand of trees that bordered the property. I shut down the engine and sat there, watching the building. Through the windows, I could see someone moving around inside. A man in coveralls, looking like he was closing up for the night. Everything seemed normal. I picked up my CB mic. "Okay, I'm here, parked away from the building like you said. Now what?" Static. No response. "Hello? You still there?" Nothing. I switched channels, trying to find the voice again, but there was no answer. Whoever had been talking to me was gone. I sat there for maybe 10 minutes, feeling increasingly stupid. What was I doing? I had an overheating engine and I was parked in the shadows instead of going inside to get help like a normal person. I was about to get out and head toward the building when the man in coveralls came out. He locked the door behind him, turned off the inside lights, and walked toward a pickup truck parked beside the garage. He was getting ready to leave for the night, but then another vehicle pulled into the lot. A dark sedan, moving fast. It screeched to a stop in front of the building and 3 men got out. Even from where I was parked, I could see they were agitated about something. The man in coveralls turned toward them and I saw his body language change, becoming defensive. What happened next occurred so fast, I almost couldn't process it. One of the men from the sedan pulled out something that glinted in the light from the parking lot. A gun. There was a brief confrontation, voices raised, though I couldn't hear the words. Then one of the men grabbed the mechanic and forced him back toward the building, making him unlock the door. They all went inside. Through the window, I could see them forcing the mechanic toward what was probably a safe or cash register. I was witnessing a robbery. My hands were shaking as I picked up my CB mic and switched to Channel 9, the emergency channel. I put out a call about an armed robbery in progress and gave the location. Another driver responded immediately, saying he'd call 911. I watched from my hiding spot as the situation inside unfolded. It seemed to last forever, but was probably only a few minutes. The men came back out with a bag, presumably full of cash. They shoved the mechanic to the ground in the parking lot and got back in their sedan. They took off, heading south, tires squealing. I waited until they were completely out of sight, then pulled my truck closer to the building. The mechanic was getting to his feet, shaken but apparently unharmed. By the time I reached him, I could hear sirens in the distance. The police arrived within minutes. I gave my statement, described what I'd seen, gave them the description of the sedan and the men. The mechanic was grateful I'd been there, grateful I'd called for help. If you're still listening, you probably enjoy stories like this. A like or a comment helps keep them alive. While I was talking to the police, one of the officers checked my truck. The engine had cooled down enough that he could pop the hood and take a look. He found the problem immediately. A loose hose clamp had allowed coolant to spray out. It was an easy fix. Took him less than 5 minutes to tighten it down. "You're lucky you stopped when you did," he said. "Another few miles and you would have done serious damage to her engine." I nodded, but I was thinking about something else. I was thinking about that voice on the CB, the one that had warned me about the temperature. The one that had told me exactly where to find this service station. The one that had instructed me to park away from the building. The voice that had kept me out of sight when armed robbers showed up. Before I left, I asked the officer about the timing of the robbery. Had there been any warning? Any reports of these guys hitting other places? He shook his head. "This appears to be random. Wrong place, wrong time for the owner. But lucky for him, you were here." He paused. "How did you happen to stop at this exact place? It's pretty far off the beaten path." I didn't know how to answer that. I told him about my temperature gauge warning light and left it at that. After everything was sorted out and statements were taken, I got back on the road. My engine ran smoothly. No problems at all. I made it to Wichita before dawn and dropped my load without incident. I never heard that voice on the CB again. I've tried, on long night drives, switching through channels and putting out calls, but whoever or whatever was talking to me that night has stayed silent. I've thought about it a lot in the months since. The rational explanation is that there was another driver out there who saw my truck, noticed something wrong with my engine that I hadn't seen yet, and used the CB to warn me. Someone who happened to know about that service station and the hours it kept. Someone who then left the channel before the robbery occurred. But that doesn't explain how they knew to tell me to park away from the building. That doesn't explain the timing of it all, the perfect synchronization that kept me hidden when those armed men showed up. Sometimes, late at night on an empty highway, I think about that flat, emotionless voice. The way it insisted I take exit, 42. The way it seemed to be trying to steer me away from something or toward something. I think about what might have happened if I'd pulled up to that service station like normal, if I'd been standing there talking to the mechanic when those men arrived. And I can't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching over me that night, making sure I was in the right place, at the right time, in the right position. My CB is always on now when I drive at night, always monitoring. Part of me hopes I never hear that voice again, but another part of me is listening, just in case I need help. Just in case whatever was guiding me that night decides I need protecting again. Because I don't think it was finished with me. I think it was just getting started. I've picked up exactly one hitchhiker in my entire career as a truck driver, and after what happened, I'll never pick up another one for as long as I live. This was about 3 years ago, during a run through northern Montana. If you've never driven through that part of the country, it's some of the most remote territory in the lower 48. Miles and miles of nothing but grassland and distant mountains, small towns separated by hours of empty highway. It was late September, and the weather was already starting to turn cold. I was hauling equipment from Great Falls to a mining operation near the Canadian border. The route took me up Highway 15, and the plan was to drive through the afternoon and evening, deliver the next morning, then head back south. Around 7 in the evening, as the sun was getting low on the horizon, I saw him standing on the shoulder of the road. A kid, couldn't have been more than 19 or 20, with a backpack at his feet and his thumb out. He was wearing jeans and a light jacket, not nearly enough for the cold that was settling in as the sun went down. My first instinct was to drive past. Company policy, common sense, and years of road experience all told me not to stop. But something about the situation nagged at me. We were at least 30 miles from the nearest town in either direction. The temperature was dropping fast, probably down into the 30s once night fell completely. If this kid was stuck out here overnight, he could be in real trouble. I slowed down and pulled onto the shoulder about 50 yards ahead of him. I watched in my side mirror as he grabbed his backpack and jogged up to the passenger side of the cab. I rolled down the window and leaned over. "Where you headed?" He had a thin face with several days' worth of stubble, and his eyes had that exhausted look of someone who'd been traveling for too long. "North," he said. "As far north as you're going. I'm trying to get to Cut Bank." Cut Bank was on my route, about 60 miles ahead. I hesitated, weighing the policy violation against basic human decency. "All right," I finally said, "but I need to see some ID first. Nothing personal, just being careful." He nodded like he expected that and pulled out his wallet. He showed me a Montana driver's license with his picture on it. The name said Daniel Whitmore, age 22. The address was from Kalispell, on the western side of the state. "Hop in," I said. He climbed into the cab with his backpack, and I pulled back onto the highway. For the first few miles, we didn't talk much. He sat there looking out the window at the darkening landscape, and I focused on driving. But the silence felt heavy somehow, uncomfortable, so I tried to make conversation. "Long way from Kalispell," I said. "You visiting family in Cut Bank?" He turned to look at me, and there was something odd about his expression. Not quite right. "Something like that," he said. "You got someone picking you up when we get there? It's going to be pretty late." "I'll figure it out," he said. "I always do." Another silence fell. I switched on my headlights as the last of the daylight faded. The highway stretched ahead of us, empty in both directions. No other vehicles. No lights from houses or towns. Just darkness and the white line on the road. "Thanks for stopping," he said after a while. "Most people don't anymore. Can't blame them, I guess. World's not as friendly as it used to be." "Yeah, well, I wouldn't normally," I admitted, "but it's getting cold out there, and you were a long way from anywhere." He nodded slowly. "That's the thing about this stretch of road. People get lost out here. Disappear. Nobody to see them go." Something about the way he said it made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I glanced over at him, but he was still staring out the window, his face reflected dimly in the glass. "What do you mean, disappear?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You ever hear about the missing people on Highway 15, the cold cases?" "Can't say I have. Couple dozen over the years. Drivers, hitchhikers, people whose cars broke down. They just vanish. Sometimes they find the vehicles, but no sign of the person. No bodies, no evidence. Just gone." I didn't like where this conversation was going. "That's unsettling," I said. He turned to look at me, and I swear his eyes looked different. Darker somehow, though that might have just been the dim light in the cab. You should be more careful about who you pick up out here. A chill ran down my spine. Is that a threat? No, he said quietly. It's a warning. I was starting to seriously regret stopping for this kid. I kept one hand on the wheel and moved my other hand slowly toward the CB radio, thinking I might need to call for help. What's your story, Daniel? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Why are you really out here? He looked back out the window. I'm going home. Cut Banks your home? In a way. We were passing mile marker 278 when he spoke again. This is where it happened. Where what happened? Where I died. My blood went cold. I looked over at him, and he was still staring out the window, his face expressionless. What are you talking about? 3 years ago, September 23rd, I was hitchhiking just like tonight. A truck driver picked me up just like you did. We were right about here when he pulled over and told me to get out. When I refused, when I reached for my phone to call for help, he killed me. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles were white. That's not funny, kid. That's a sick joke. He dumped my body in a ravine about 2 miles west of here. It took them 6 months to find me. My parents never knew what happened. Never got closure until they finally found my remains. I didn't want to ask, but I couldn't stop myself. If you're dead, then what the hell are you doing in my truck? He finally turned to look at me fully, and in the green glow of the dashboard lights, I could see his face clearly. There was something wrong with it, something off that I couldn't quite define. Like I was looking at a photograph instead of a real person. I'm here every night, he said, walking the same stretch of highway where I died, trying to hitch a ride, and every once in a while, someone stops, someone like you, someone who sees a kid in trouble and wants to help. This isn't real, I said. This isn't happening. Look at your passenger seat, he said. I didn't want to. Every instinct told me not to look, but I couldn't help myself. I turned my head and looked at the seat beside me. It was empty. No hitchhiker, no backpack, no one sitting there at all, but I could still hear his voice, coming from the empty seat. Most people who stop for me, they're good people, like you. People who still have enough compassion to help a stranger. So I give them a warning. I tell them my story. I make sure they understand how dangerous this road can be. I was starting to hyperventilate. My vision was going blurry at the edges. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be happening. There are bad people who use this highway, the voice continued. Predators who look for vulnerable travelers, who take advantage of the isolation. I was killed by one, but I won't let others suffer the same fate if I can help it. The highway ahead of me seemed to be narrowing, the darkness pressing in. I was having trouble focusing on the road. Up ahead, about 5 miles, there's a vehicle on the shoulder with its hazards on. You're going to see someone standing next to it, waving for help. I tried to speak but couldn't form words. Don't stop, the voice said firmly. Don't slow down, don't even look at them, just keep driving. That person is not what they seem. They've killed before, and they're hunting tonight. Why should I believe you? I finally managed to whisper. Because I was where you are. I made the mistake of trusting the wrong person. I'm trying to save you from the same fate. The cab was getting colder. I could see my breath fogging in the air. What do you want from me? Just drive. Keep going. And after tonight, maybe think twice before picking up strangers. The next one might not be me. The next one might be something worse. I drove in silence, my entire body trembling. The mile markers ticked past. Mile 283. Mile 284. Then, just like he'd said, I saw lights ahead, a vehicle on the shoulder with its hazards flashing, and next to it, barely visible in my headlights, a figure waving both arms. Every instinct I had screamed at me to stop. Someone was in trouble. Someone needed help. But I remembered the voice's warning. I pressed the accelerator and kept driving. As I passed the stranded vehicle, I got a glimpse of the person flagging for help. Something about them was wrong. The way they moved was too jerky, too aggressive. And when my headlights caught their face, just for a second, I saw an expression that wasn't fear or relief. It was hunger. I floored it and didn't slow down until I was 10 miles past that spot. The cold in the cab gradually faded. The sense of presence that had been there since I'd picked up the hitchhiker slowly dissipated. I looked at the passenger seat. Still empty. No sign that anyone had ever been there. When I finally reached Cut Bank around 10 that night, I pulled into the first gas station I found. I sat there with the engine running, trying to calm down, trying to convince myself that I'd hallucinated the whole thing. Exhaustion, isolation, my imagination running wild. But then I walked inside the gas station and saw a bulletin board near the entrance. Missing person flyers, the kind you see in small towns across America. Among them was one that caught my eye. A young man's face stared out from the flyer. Daniel Whitmore, age 19 at the time of disappearance. Missing since September 23rd, 3 years earlier. Last seen hitchhiking on Highway 15 near mile marker 278. The picture showed the same thin face, the same tired eyes I'd seen in my truck less than 2 hours ago. I stood there staring at that flyer until the clerk asked if I was okay. I wasn't okay. I'm still not okay. I completed my delivery the next morning and headed south, taking a different route back. I haven't driven Highway 15 through that stretch of Montana since, and I never will again. And I've never picked up another hitchhiker, not because I don't want to help, but because I don't know anymore who's real and who's not. I don't know who needs help and who's something else entirely, wearing a human face. Sometimes at night when I'm driving through remote areas, I see people on the side of the road. They wave, they signal for help. They stand in the shadows watching as I pass. And I never stop. I just keep driving. Because Daniel Whitmore taught me that some people are beyond help. And some of the ones who need help the most are already dead. There's a truck stop in western Nebraska that I can never find twice. I've looked for it on maps, asked other drivers about it, even tried to retrace my exact route. It's not there, doesn't exist. Except I know it does, because I stopped there. I spent 2 hours there. And what happened during those 2 hours convinced me that some places exist outside the normal rules of reality. This was last November, during an overnight haul from Denver to Des Moines. I'd been making good time through Colorado and crossed into Nebraska around midnight. The route took me along I-80, the main east-west corridor that cuts straight across the state. It's monotonous driving, mostly flat farmland and the occasional small town, but the road is good and traffic is usually light at night. Around 2 a.m, I started getting tired. Not dangerously so, but enough that I thought about finding a place to stop for coffee and a short break. I'd been driving for about 6 hours straight, and I still had another 6 to go before reaching Des Moines. That's when I saw the sign. Big, bright, impossible to miss. Truck stop, next exit, fuel, food, parking. The weird thing was, I drove this route regularly and didn't remember a truck stop at this particular exit. But then again, new places opened up all the time, and it had been a few months since my last run through here. I signaled and took the exit. The access road curved away from the highway and went on longer than I expected. Most truck stops are positioned right off the interstate for easy access, but this one seemed to be set back a ways. I followed the road through darkness, farmland on either side, starting to wonder if I'd made a mistake. Then I saw the lights. The truck stop appeared suddenly, like it had materialized out of the night. It was huge, much bigger than the usual places. The main building was an old-style diner with a lot attached for trucks, and the whole complex was lit up with those old mercury vapor lights that give everything a bluish tinge. There were maybe a dozen rigs parked in various spaces, their chrome gleaming under the lights. I pulled in and found a spot near the edge of the lot. As I shut down my engine, I noticed something odd. It was completely silent. No traffic noise from the highway, even though we couldn't be more than a mile from I-80. No sound of other trucks running their engines or refrigeration units. Just dead silence. I climbed out of my cab and stretched. The air was cold and still, with that particular quality that air has late at night when you're far from any city. I looked around the lot at the other trucks. They were all older models, the kind you don't see much anymore. Kenworths and Peterbilts from the 70s and 80s, maybe early 90s at the newest. The diner was one of those classic stainless steel jobs that looked like a railroad car. Warm light glowed through the windows, and I could see people moving around inside. A neon sign above the door read, "Mile Zero Truck Stop, open 24 hours. Mile Zero. That was a strange name. Truck drivers usually referred to locations by their mile marker number, but I'd never heard of a Mile Zero. I walked across the lot toward the entrance. As I got closer, I noticed that the building looked old but impeccably maintained. Not a spot of rust on the chrome, not a crack in the windows. It looked like it had been built decades ago, but had somehow avoided all the wear and tear that usually comes with time. I pushed through the door, and a small bell chimed. The inside matched the outside, a perfect preservation of classic truck stop diner aesthetics. Red vinyl booths, a long counter with swivel stools, black and white checkered floor. A jukebox in the corner playing some country song I didn't recognize, old tinny and distant sounding. There were maybe 8 or 10 people scattered around the diner. All men, all wearing the kind of clothes truck drivers wore. But something about them seemed off. Their clothes were just slightly out of style. Not costume-level wrong, but subtly dated. Bell-bottom jeans, polyester shirts with wide collars, trucker hats with logos for companies I didn't recognize. A waitress approached me, smiling. She was maybe 50, with her hair in a style I associated with old photographs of my mother from the 80s. "Sit anywhere, honey. Coffee?" "Yeah, coffee would be great," I said, sliding into a booth near the window. She brought a cup and filled it from a glass pot. The coffee smelled good, normal. "Menu?" she asked. "Just coffee for now, thanks." She nodded and walked away. I sat there warming my hands on the cup, looking around the diner. None of the other customers were talking to each other. They all sat alone at their respective booths and counter spots, eating or drinking coffee, staring at nothing in particular. I pulled out my phone to check the time. 2:17 a.m., but when I looked at the screen, I noticed something strange. No signal, not even one bar. And the phone felt wrong somehow, heavier than it should be. I looked at it more closely and realized it had changed. The model was different. It was my phone, same case, same scratches and wear marks, but the actual device was an older model, like something from 5 or 6 years ago. My heart started beating faster. I shoved the phone back in my pocket and looked around the diner with fresh eyes. The jukebox was playing a song that sounded like it was recorded on old vinyl, all pops and crackles underneath the music. The clock on the wall had stopped at 11:47. The calendar behind the counter showed November 1987. That was almost 40 years ago. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly on the floor. Several of the other customers looked up at me with blank expressions. The waitress came over. "You okay, honey? You look like you've seen a ghost." "What year is this?" I asked, my voice shaking. She smiled, but there was something sad in it. "You're new here." "What year?" I repeated. "It's always November in here. Always 1987. Always Mile Zero." She gestured around the diner. These boys have been here a long time. Some of them don't even remember what year they came in. They just know they haven't left. I backed toward the door. I need to go. You can leave, she said. That's the difference. You still have a choice, but you need to leave now, before you forget why you're here, before you settle into a booth and become like them. She pointed at the silent men eating their meals. They stopped for coffee, meant to stay for just a few minutes, but time works different in here. What feels like an hour is much longer out there. And after a while, they forgot they had anywhere else to be. I looked at the men again, really looked at them, their blank stares, their mechanical movements. They weren't being held here. They'd just forgotten to leave, forgotten there was anywhere else to go. How do I make sure I leave? I asked. The waitress walked to the cash register and picked up a small silver bell, the kind you might use to call for service. She handed it to me. Keep this. Don't put it down. As long as you're holding it, you'll remember this isn't where you belong. You'll remember there's a highway out there, a destination waiting. I took the bell. It was cold and solid in my hand. The door's right there, she said, pointing. Walk out, get in your truck, drive until you reach the highway. Don't look back. Don't stop until you're on I-80 again. What about them? I asked, gesturing to the other drivers. Can they leave too? If they remember they want to, but most of them don't remember anymore. They're not trapped. They're just lost. I clutched the bell and walked toward the door. Every step felt heavy, like walking through water. Part of me wanted to sit back down, order some food, rest for a while. What was the hurry? I could stay a few more minutes, but the bell in my hand kept me focused. I pushed through the door and out into the parking lot. The cold air hit me like a slap, shocking me back to full awareness. I walked quickly to my truck, climbed into the cab, and started the engine. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the key. I pulled out of the parking space and headed for the exit, following the access road back the way I'd come. In my rearview mirror, I could see the lights of the truck stop, bright and welcoming in the darkness. I wanted to turn around. I wanted to go back and stay forever in that warm, timeless place. But I kept driving. I gripped the bell in one hand and the steering wheel in the other, and I drove. The access road seemed to go on forever, much longer than it had when I'd come in. The darkness pressed against my windows, absolute and suffocating. I was starting to panic, thinking I'd never find the highway again, when suddenly the road ended and I was back on I-80. The change was jarring. One moment I was on that dark country road, the next I was on the interstate with other vehicles around me and lights in the distance. I merged into traffic and checked my clock. It read 4:43 a.m. I'd been at that truck stop for over 2 hours, but it had felt like maybe 20 minutes. I drove straight through to Des Moines without stopping again. When the sun came up, I pulled into a normal, modern truck stop and went inside. I asked the clerk if she knew anything about a place called Mile Zero Truck Stop in western Nebraska. She'd never heard of it. I asked 3 other drivers the same question. None of them knew what I was talking about. That night in my motel room, I pulled the silver bell out of my pocket and set it on the nightstand. It sat there glinting in the lamplight, proof that what I'd experienced was real. I still have that bell. I keep it in my cab at all times, because I know that truck stop is still out there, somewhere off I-80 in Nebraska. It's waiting for tired drivers who need a rest, who just want to stop for a few minutes. And I know that if I ever see that sign again, truck stop, next exit, fuel, food, parking, I need to keep driving. Because if I stop there again, if I go back inside that timeless diner, I might not have the strength to leave a second time. I might become like those other drivers, sitting in a booth in 1987, eating a meal that never ends, waiting for a journey I've forgotten I was on. The bell on my nightstand reminds me that some rest stops aren't meant for the living. They're for people who've lost their way and don't remember how to find it again. And I refuse to be lost. Not while I still remember where I'm going. Not while I can still hear the bell ringing, calling me back to reality. In 12 years of driving, I've hauled just about everything you can imagine. Electronics, furniture, produce, construction materials, even livestock a few times. You learn not to ask too many questions about the cargo. You pick it up, you deliver it, you collect your pay, and you move on. That's the job. But there was one load, about 8 months ago, that broke all my rules. One delivery that I should have refused, because what I transported, what I helped bring into this world, was something that should have stayed locked away. It started with a phone call from my dispatcher on a Tuesday morning in March. I was in Tucson, had just finished a delivery, and was planning to head back toward Texas to pick up my next load. But dispatch had a different plan. "We've got a special request job," she said. "High pay, but it's kind of unusual. Client specifically requested an experienced driver with a clean record. That's you." "What's the cargo?" I asked. "Medical equipment, temperature-controlled transport. Pickup in Tucson, delivery to a private research facility in northern Arizona, up near Page." "What kind of research facility?" "Doesn't say." Client was vague on the details, but they're paying triple the normal rate for a load this size, and it needs to be delivered by tomorrow night at the latest. Triple rate was hard to turn down, and it was a relatively short haul, maybe 6 or 7 hours drive. "What are the temperature requirements?" "Needs to stay between 35 and 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Your refrigeration unit can handle that, no problem." I agreed to take the job. Looking back now, that was my first mistake. When something pays that much more than normal, there's usually a reason. And it's rarely a good one. The pickup was at a medical supply warehouse on the industrial side of Tucson. I backed up to their loading dock just before noon, and a crew came out with the cargo. It was a single large crate, maybe 8 feet long and 3 feet wide, made of reinforced metal with heavy-duty locks. The thing must have weighed close to 500 pounds based on how the forklift handled it. "What's in there?" I asked the loading supervisor. He gave me a look that shut down any further questions. "Specialized medical equipment. Temperature sensitive. Handle with care. Don't open it under any circumstances." They loaded it into my refrigerated trailer, and I secured it with straps. The supervisor handed me the paperwork. The manifest listed the contents as biological research materials, handle with extreme caution. The delivery address was just coordinates, not a street address, middle of nowhere up near Lake Powell. "You'll see the facility when you get close," the supervisor said. "Can't miss it, just follow the coordinates." I should have been more concerned about all the red flags. The vague descriptions, the unusual delivery location, the excessive security around a medical equipment shipment. But the money was good, and I told myself it was probably just some rich pharmaceutical company doing research away from prying eyes. I hit the road around 1 in the afternoon. The route took me north on Highway 89, up through spectacular Arizona landscape, red rocks and pine forests, elevation climbing as I got further north. The refrigeration unit hummed along, keeping the cargo at the required temperature. For the first few hours, everything was normal. I listened to music, enjoyed the scenery, made good time. But as the sun started to set and I got deeper into the remote areas north of Flagstaff, things started feeling wrong. It began with the smell. Even though the cargo was in a sealed crate in a sealed refrigerated trailer, I started noticing an odor seeping into the cab. It was faint at first, just a hint of something chemical and organic mixed together, like formaldehyde combined with meat starting to turn. I checked the seals on the pass-through to the trailer, made sure everything was secure. But the smell kept getting stronger. Then I started hearing sounds from the trailer. Thumping. like something moving around back there. I told myself it was just the cargo shifting, the crate moving slightly despite the straps, but the sounds were too rhythmic, too regular. Thump, thump, thump. Like something beating against the inside of the crate. I pulled over at a turnout and got out to check the load. The sun had set completely by this point, and I was on a lonely stretch of highway with nothing around for miles. I opened the trailer door and shined my flashlight inside. The crate was exactly where it should be, properly secured. But there was something leaking from it. A dark fluid, almost black in the beam of my flashlight, pooling under one corner of the crate, and the smell that came out when I opened the trailer was overwhelming, making my eyes water. The thumping had stopped when I opened the door. Everything was silent except for the sound of my refrigeration unit running. I stood there for a long moment, trying to decide what to do. The right thing would have been to call dispatch, report the leak, refuse to deliver a load that was clearly not what it was supposed to be. But I thought about the money. Triple rate, and I thought about my bills, my truck payment, the fact that work had been slower than usual this season. So I closed the trailer door, got back in my cab, and kept driving. That was my second mistake, the one I'll regret for the rest of my life. The thumping started again after about 20 minutes. Louder now, more insistent, and I started hearing something else. A sound that might have been my imagination, might have been the wind, but sounded almost like whispering. Words I couldn't quite make out, coming from the trailer behind me. My GPS led me off the main highway onto increasingly remote roads, paved at first, then gravel, then barely more than dirt tracks winding through the forest. I was starting to seriously question whether I was going to the right place when I saw lights ahead. The facility appeared out of nowhere, a sprawling compound of modern buildings surrounded by high fences and security gates. There were no signs, no indication of what the place was. Just coordinates that matched my destination. I pulled up to the gate, and it opened automatically. A speaker crackled to life. Proceed to loading dock 3. Do not exit your vehicle until instructed. I followed the internal roads to the indicated dock. The place was bustling with activity, even though it was now after 9 p.m. People in what looked like hazmat suits moving between buildings. Security guards with serious hardware patrolling the perimeter. This was no ordinary research facility. At the loading dock, a crew was waiting. They moved with military precision, backing up specialized equipment to my trailer. I sat in my cab, watching in my mirrors as they opened the trailer door and immediately began spraying some kind of fog or decontaminant inside. They extracted the crate using a mechanized system, never touching it directly. The whole operation took maybe 10 minutes. Then someone knocked on my cab door. I rolled down my window. A man in a suit, clearly in charge, looked up at me. You were instructed not to open the trailer during transport. I didn't, I lied. Just checked on it at a rest stop to make sure everything was secure. His expression made it clear he didn't believe me. Did you hear or see anything unusual? I should have told the truth, should have described the thumping, the leaking, the smell. But I was scared now, scared of what I might have been transporting, scared of what these people might do if I admitted to violating the terms of the delivery. No, I said, nothing unusual. Just a normal delivery. He studied me for a long moment. Then he handed me an envelope. Your payment, plus a bonus for discretion. We'll need you to sign a non-disclosure agreement. The envelope was thick with cash. I signed the NDA without reading it, just wanting to get out of there. He handed me a card with a phone number. If you experience any unusual symptoms in the next few weeks, call this number immediately. Headaches, fever, hallucinations, anything out of the ordinary. What was I transporting? I asked. That's covered by the NDA you just signed, he said coldly. Drive safely. I got out of there as fast as I could, my trailer now empty, the smell slowly dissipating. I drove all night, not stopping until I was back in Flagstaff and could see normal people, normal traffic, normal life. But things weren't normal. Not for me. The next few weeks were rough. I did experience symptoms, though I never called that number. Vivid nightmares about what might have been in that crate. Dreams of something organic and mechanical combined. Something that had been alive or was becoming alive during that transport. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, certain I could still hear that thumping sound, that whispering. I tried to research the facility using the coordinates, but there was no public information. The location showed up on maps as undeveloped land. Officially, nothing was there. Then, about 2 months after the delivery, I saw a news report. There had been an incident at an undisclosed research facility in northern Arizona. Details were scarce, but several people were dead, and there was talk of a containment breach. The story disappeared from the news cycle within 24 hours, buried or classified or just forgotten. But I knew it was the place where I'd made that delivery. And I knew that whatever I'd transported there, whatever had been thumping and leaking and whispering in that crate, had gotten out. I've thought about going to the authorities, telling someone what I know, but the NDE, the people I dealt with, the whole setup screams government or military, black budget research, the kind of thing that people who talk about too much tend to disappear over. So I keep quiet, I drive my routes, I make my deliveries. And I try not to think about that night. But the nightmares haven't stopped. And sometimes, late at night when I'm alone on a dark highway, I hear that thumping sound again, coming from my empty trailer, coming from inside my head. I can't tell anymore. I broke my own rule. I didn't ask questions. I transported something I shouldn't have, delivered it to people who had no business having it, and whatever it was, it's out there now, growing, changing, becoming something worse. I don't know what they were creating in that facility. I don't know if it was biological or technological or something in between, but I know it shouldn't exist. And I know that I helped bring it into this world. That's something I'll have to live with, knowing that somewhere out there, something is moving, something is hunting, something is becoming whatever those people designed it to be. And it all traveled in my trailer, thumping and leaking and whispering through the Arizona night. Every truck driver knows about blind spots. They're part of the job, part of what makes driving something this big through traffic dangerous. You've got mirrors, you've got cameras if you're lucky, but there are still angles you just can't see. Places where a car or motorcycle could be hiding, invisible until they're right on top of you. But what I'm about to tell you isn't about a vehicle in my blind spot. It's about something else. Something that shouldn't exist but does, hiding in that space where sight and reflection don't quite meet. This started about 6 months ago. I was running a regular route, shuttling loads between Charlotte and Atlanta several times a week. It's a route I knew by heart, every rest stop and truck stop, every tricky merge and construction zone. Nothing special about it, just steady work that paid the bills. The first time I saw it was on a Tuesday night in late May. I was southbound on I-85, somewhere between Gastonia and the South Carolina border. Traffic was moderate, the usual mix of cars and trucks making the run between the two cities. I was in the right lane, cruising at about 65, when I glanced at my passenger side mirror. There was something in my blind spot. Not a vehicle, a shadow, a darkness that was thicker than it should be, that seemed to absorb the light from the other cars rather than reflect it. It was roughly the size and shape of a sedan, holding position right at the edge of where my mirror could see. I checked my blind spot camera, one of the newer additions to my rig that gave me a better view of that danger zone. But the screen showed nothing, just the empty road and other traffic at normal distances. I looked back at the mirror. The shadow was still there. Dark and somehow solid-looking, keeping perfect pace with my truck. I slowed down, dropping my speed by about 10 miles per hour. The shadow stayed with me, maintaining its exact position in my blind spot. I sped up, pushing to 70. Same thing. It matched my speed perfectly, never moving forward or back, never drifting into visible range. After about 5 minutes of this, another car moved into the lane beside me, passing through the space where the shadow appeared to be. The car passed normally, no collision, no sign that anything was there, but when it cleared, the shadow was back, filling that blind spot like it had never been disturbed. I told myself it was just an optical illusion, some trick of the lighting, maybe a problem with my mirror or a smudge that was creating a dark spot. I'd have it checked out when I got to Atlanta, but then it moved. Just a slight shift, a rippling motion like something adjusting its position, and for just a moment I thought I saw something that looked like a face, not a human face, something else. Eyes that glinted with reflected light and a mouth that was too wide, split into a grin that no person could make. Then it was just a shadow again. Formless darkness in my blind spot. I white-knuckled it the rest of the way to Atlanta, constantly checking that mirror, watching the shadow keep pace. When I finally pulled into the distribution center and parked, I sat in my cab for a long moment, breathing hard, before I got the courage to look at the passenger side mirror again. Nothing. Just the normal view of the parking lot, other trucks, the loading docks. No shadow. I convinced myself I'd been hallucinating. Exhaustion, stress, maybe some medical issue I needed to get checked out. I made the delivery, grabbed a few hours of sleep at a nearby truck stop, and headed back north the next morning. But that afternoon, northbound on I-85, it was back. Same position. Same dark presence in my blind spot, and this time I was well rested, alert, certain I wasn't hallucinating. It was there. Something was there. Over the next few weeks, it became a constant companion on my drives. Not every trip, but most of them, always in the same position, always that same impossible shadow holding in my blind spot. I started experimenting with it, trying to figure out what it was and what it wanted. I tried talking to it, feeling like an idiot, but too desperate for answers to care. No response. I tried ignoring it completely, pretending it wasn't there. It stayed anyway. I even tried praying, though I'm not a particularly religious man. Nothing changed. The only thing that seemed to affect it was my emotional state. When I was calm, it was just a shadow. But when I got angry or frightened or stressed, it would move. Ripple. And sometimes I'd catch glimpses of that face again, watching me from the darkness. Other drivers started noticing changes in me. I was jumpy, constantly checking my mirrors, swerving occasionally to avoid something that wasn't there. My dispatcher asked if I was having medical issues. My ex-wife, who I still talk to occasionally, said I sounded paranoid. But I knew I wasn't crazy. It was real, and it was getting bolder. About 3 months in, it started appearing outside my truck. I'd be parked at a rest stop, and I'd see that same impossible shadow at the edge of the parking lot, just beyond the reach of the security lights, always at the periphery, always where you had to turn your head to see it directly, and by the time you did, it was gone. I started researching online, looking for similar experiences. Turns out I wasn't alone. There were scattered reports from other truck drivers, going back years, about shadow figures that appeared in blind spots. Some called them road wraiths or highway haunters. The theories varied wildly. Ghosts of people killed in traffic accidents, hallucinations caused by sleep deprivation and road hypnosis. Interdimensional beings that fed on the fear and isolation of long-haul driving. None of the explanations satisfied me. But what bothered me most was what I found in the older reports. Drivers who reported these shadows often had accidents shortly after. Not immediately, but within weeks or months. Like the thing in their blind spot eventually caused them to make a fatal mistake. One driver's account from 3 years ago particularly disturbed me. He described the same experience I was having, shadow in the blind spot, glimpses of an inhuman face. His last post was about how the shadow had started appearing in both mirrors, surrounding him, closing in. He died 2 weeks later in a single-vehicle accident, drove his truck off an overpass for no apparent reason. I stopped sleeping well. Every time I got behind the wheel, I'd check that mirror, and there it would be. Waiting, watching, getting more active, more present, more real with each passing day. Then last week something changed. I was making my usual run south, early evening, light traffic. The shadow was there, as it always was, but this time, when I glanced at the mirror, it was closer, not in my blind spot anymore. It was right next to my door, close enough that I should have been able to see it through my side window. I turned my head. Nothing there. But in the mirror, that dark shape was pressed against my truck, and I could see the face clearly now. It wasn't human. It was something that wore a human shape the way you might wear a coat, poorly fitted and wrong. And it was reaching toward my door, a long, thin arm ending in too many fingers, scratching at the handle. I swerved, narrowly missing the car in the lane next to me. Horns blared. I corrected, heart pounding, hands shaking on the wheel. When I looked at the mirror again, the shadow had fallen back to its usual position in my blind spot, but it had proven a point. It could move, it could reach me, and it was only a matter of time before it did. I'm writing this from a motel room in Atlanta. I called my dispatcher this morning and told her I'm done. Finished. I'm selling my truck, getting out of long-haul driving, finding something else to do with my life. She tried to talk me out of it, said I was having a breakdown, that I just needed some time off. Maybe she's right. Maybe that's all this is. Some kind of psychological break caused by years of isolation and stress manifesting as a shadow monster in my mirrors. But I don't think so. Because that shadow isn't just in my truck mirrors anymore. It's in my motel room mirror. I can see it in my peripheral vision, standing behind me in the reflection, even though when I turn around, there's nothing there. It followed me, and I think it's getting ready to do whatever it is that these things do when they finally close the distance. I'm leaving tonight, driving my personal car, not the truck, heading to my sister's place in Tennessee, maybe getting away from the highways, away from the routes where I always saw it, will break whatever connection exists between us. Or maybe it's too late. Maybe once these things latch on to you, they don't let go. Maybe that driver from 3 years ago had the right idea, ending it quickly before the thing could take him slowly. I don't know. I just know that I can't drive anymore. Can't spend hours staring at mirrors, waiting to see that shadow shift and move and reach. If you're a driver and you start seeing something in your blind spot, something that doesn't make sense, that doesn't follow the normal rules of light and reflection, don't ignore it. Don't convince yourself it's nothing. Get out. Find a different job. Do whatever it takes. Because these things are real. They exist in those spaces where we can't quite see, where our vision fails and leaves us vulnerable. And once they find you, they don't leave. The shadow is in my bathroom mirror now. I can see it while I'm typing this. Standing in the shower, behind the curtain that's pulled back. Just waiting. I think my time is running out. Way stations are part of the routine for any truck driver. You see the signs. You pull in if you're required to. They check your weight and your paperwork, and you're back on the road in a few minutes. Some states are stricter than others, but it's all pretty standardized. Nothing strange about them, just bureaucracy and safety checks. At least that's what I thought before I pulled into the way station on Highway 93 in Nevada. This happened in early September, during a run from Las Vegas to Twin Falls, Idaho. I was hauling electronics, a fairly light load that I knew would be well under the weight limits. The route took me north through the empty desert of central Nevada, mile after mile of nothing but sagebrush and distant mountains. It was mid-afternoon when I saw the sign, "Way station 2 miles, all commercial vehicles must enter." Nothing unusual about it. I'd stopped at stations along this route before, though I couldn't specifically remember one at this location. But Nevada has several, and they all blur together after a while. I took the exit and followed the ramp to the station. It was a typical setup, a low building with scales embedded in the pavement, a couple of parking spaces for trucks that needed additional inspection, but something about it felt off immediately. The place was completely empty. No other trucks, no vehicles of any kind. And more strange, no staff visible in the building. Way stations usually had at least 1 or 2 DOT officers present during operating hours, but I couldn't see anyone through the windows. There was an electronic sign with instructions: "Proceed to scale. Stop when light turns red." I pulled forward slowly onto the scale. The light turned red, and I set my brake. Then I waited and waited. No one came out of the building. No voice came over the speaker system that they usually use to communicate with drivers. After about 5 minutes, I was starting to get annoyed. I reached for my CB to call dispatch when the speaker crackled to life. "Please state your name and date of birth." The voice was flat, digitized like an automated system. Not unusual. Some way stations had moved to more automated processes. I gave the information. "Please state your current cargo." "Electronics, computer components. Manifest is in the system under load number JK7749. A pause. Then, "Please state your point of origin and destination." "Las Vegas to Twin Falls." "Listen, is someone actually there, or is this just an automated system? Because I'm on a schedule, and please remain on the scale. You are being weighed." I looked at my mirrors. The scale display that drivers could usually see was dark, not showing any numbers. I'd been weighed hundreds of times, and it never took more than a few seconds for the system to get a reading. "There seems to be a malfunction with your scale," I said into the air, not sure if anyone was actually listening. "I'm going to pull forward and do not leave the scale. You are being weighed." There was something in that digitized voice now, an undertone that sounded almost threatening. I sat there, engine idling, growing more uncomfortable by the second. Then the speaker came back. "You're overweight." "What? That's impossible. My load is well under the limit. I had this truck weighed at the origination point. You're carrying excess weight. Please prepare for inspection." I checked my mirrors again. Still no one visible. No inspection officers approaching my truck. The whole place remained empty and silent except for the hum of my engine and the whisper of wind across the desert. "Where's the excess weight supposed to be?" I asked, frustration overtaking my unease. "My cargo is documented and within limits." The speaker was quiet for a long moment. Then, "The excess weight is not cargo." A chill went down my spine. What's that supposed to mean? "You are carrying passengers. Undocumented passengers. Please exit your vehicle and open your trailer for inspection." "I don't have passengers. I never carry passengers. It's against company policy, and it's illegal." "You are carrying 3 passengers. They have been with you for some time. Please exit your vehicle." My heart was pounding now. This was wrong. All of this was wrong. I put my truck in gear, ready to just drive off the scale and deal with whatever fines or consequences came from leaving a way station without clearance. But my truck wouldn't move. The brakes wouldn't release. I pressed the button, heard the air release, but the truck stayed locked in place, like something was holding it down. The speaker crackled again. 3 passengers, 1 in your sleeper berth, 2 in your trailer. They have been traveling with you for approximately 847 miles. Since Las Vegas. I twisted around to look into my sleeper berth. Empty, as I knew it would be. I hadn't had anyone in my truck since leaving Vegas. I was completely alone. "There's no one in my truck," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Your system is malfunctioning. I'm calling my dispatcher and the Nevada Highway Patrol to report this." "Look in your mirrors," the voice said. "Look at your truck. Tell us what you see." I didn't want to look. Every instinct told me not to, but I couldn't help myself. I checked my driver's side mirror, angling it to get a view along the length of my truck. At first, I saw nothing unusual. Just my trailer, the logo of the company I was hauling for, the reflection of the desert sun on metal. Then I saw the shadows. 3 of them. They were underneath my trailer, clinging to the undercarriage like they were made of the darkness itself, human-shaped but elongated, stretched out and pressed flat against the metal. As I watched, one of them moved, shifted position slightly. Its head turned, and I saw 2 points of light where eyes should be, looking directly at the mirror, looking at me. I jerked my gaze away, breathing hard. "What are they?" I asked the empty air. "Passengers," the voice replied. "Hitchhikers. They attach themselves to vehicles and feed on the driver's energy. Most drivers never notice them. They cause fatigue, distraction, accidents. You have been unusually resistant. You are stronger than most." "How do I get rid of them?" "You cannot. They have claimed you. They will stay with you until you are no longer useful to them, until you crash, until you die." "That's not acceptable," I said, fear turning to anger. "There has to be a way to remove them." "There is one way." "What is it?" "You must make them leave voluntarily. You must become an unsuitable host." "How?" The voice paused. Then, "Fear weakens them. They feed on routine, on the hypnotic state of long-distance driving, on the exhaustion and boredom that makes drivers vulnerable. But intense fear, the kind that breaks through that fog, that makes them uncomfortable. If you can generate enough fear, enough adrenaline, enough chaos, they may detach. You want me to scare myself? We want you to wake up. Fully. Completely. No more autopilot. No more mindless driving. Every moment alert, every moment intense. Make yourself an unpleasant meal, and they will seek an easier host." The speaker went silent. A moment later, my brakes released with a hiss of air. The scale light turned green. "You may proceed. Good luck, driver." I pulled off the scale and didn't stop until I was back on the highway, putting distance between myself and that place. My hands were shaking on the wheel. I kept checking my mirrors, catching glimpses of those shadows underneath my trailer, clinging like parasites. I thought about what the voice had said. Fear, chaos, breaking the routine. For the next 100 miles, I drove like I was being chased. I took exits at random, pulled onto side roads, turned around, changed routes constantly. I played my music as loud as it would go. I called friends, family, anyone who would talk to me, forcing myself to stay engaged and present. I stopped every hour, got out, walked around, did jumping jacks in parking lots. Anything to keep my heart rate up, my mind sharp, my fear present. And slowly, over the course of that long afternoon and evening, I felt them letting go. I'd catch glimpses in my mirrors of those shadows shifting, moving toward the rear of my trailer, getting weaker. One dropped off somewhere near the Idaho border. I saw it fall away in my mirror, a splash of darkness on the highway that was immediately left behind. The other 2 held on longer. But by the time I reached Twin Falls, well after midnight, I was down to just 1. And when I made my delivery the next morning, when I did my post-trip inspection in full daylight, they were finally gone. My trailer undercarriage was clean, no shadows, no passengers. But I've never been the same. Because now I know they're out there. Shadow hitchhikers clinging to trucks all across America, feeding on tired drivers, causing the accidents and near misses that we blame on exhaustion or distraction. I drive differently now. Never on autopilot, never zoning out, every moment alert, present, aware. It's exhausting. It's probably unsustainable long term, but it's kept me alive, and it's kept them away. And I've never been able to find that way station again. I've driven Highway 93 through that section of Nevada a dozen times since. There's no way station there. No exit, no building, no scales. But somewhere in Nevada, there's a place that weighs more than cargo, a place that sees what most drivers can't, a place that warns the ones who might survive what's hunting them. I was warned. I survived. And now I'm warning you. If you're a driver and you're always tired, always exhausted no matter how much you sleep, if you have near misses that you can't explain, if you feel like something is draining you, check underneath your trailer, look carefully at the shadows, and pray you don't see eyes looking back. In the early days of trucking, before GPS and modern communication, drivers used to form convoys for long hauls through remote areas. There was safety in numbers, company during lonely stretches, and help available if something went wrong. The practice has mostly died out now, but you still see impromptu convoys forming sometimes. Trucks running the same route at the same time, staying together for a while before splitting off to their various destinations. What I experienced last winter was something like a convoy, except it wasn't voluntary, and once it started, I couldn't find a way to leave. I was making a run from Minneapolis to Billings, Montana in late January. The weather forecast was calling for snow, but nothing too severe, so I decided to push through rather than delay the delivery. I left Minneapolis around 4 in the afternoon, planning to drive through the night and arrive in Billings by morning. The snow started falling around the time I crossed into South Dakota. Light at first, just flurries, but gradually getting heavier as I headed west. By the time I reached the I-90 corridor, visibility was dropping and the roads were getting slick. I slowed down, put my flashers on, and settled in for a long, careful drive. That's when I saw them, 3 other semis running together in the right lane, maintaining perfect spacing between each vehicle. I caught up to them and fell in behind, grateful for the company. There's something reassuring about not being alone on a bad weather drive. We continued like that for about an hour, 4 trucks in a line, all maintaining the same speed, all pushing westward through the snow. I tried to raise them on the CB just to make contact, confirm we were all watching out for each other. No response. I cycled through all the common channels. Still nothing. Maybe their radios were off. Some drivers don't like the chatter. I let it go and just focused on following the taillights of the truck ahead of me. The snow got worse. Much worse. What had been a manageable winter drive turned into near whiteout conditions. I could barely see the truck I was following, just the red glow of its taillights in the swirling snow. But we kept going, maintaining our convoy, and I felt safer being part of a group than I would have alone. At some point, I realized we'd been driving for longer than I thought. I checked my GPS. According to it, we should have reached Wall, South Dakota by now, a town where I'd planned to stop for fuel. But I hadn't seen any exit signs, hadn't seen any indication of towns or rest areas. I looked at the GPS more carefully. The map showed us on I-90, but our position marker wasn't moving. It showed us in the same location we'd been in an hour ago, even though I knew we'd been driving continuously, making steady progress. I tried slowing down, thinking I'd pull over at the next exit and figure out what was going on. But when I reduced my speed, the truck behind me, one I hadn't noticed joining the convoy, moved up close, uncomfortably close, like it was pushing me forward. When I tried to speed up to create distance, it matched my speed exactly. I tried to change lanes to pull out of the convoy, but every time I signaled and started to move left, there was another truck in the lane beside me. I hadn't seen it pass. Hadn't noticed it pulling alongside, but there it was, blocking my escape. I was boxed in. Trucks ahead, behind, and beside me, all moving at exactly the same speed, all running through this endless snowstorm. I tried the CB again. This is Big Red running westbound in a convoy on I-90. Is anyone out there? Can anyone hear me? Static. Then faintly a voice. Keep driving. Who is this? What's going on? Keep driving. Don't stop. Don't leave the road. I need to refuel. I need to stop. Check your fuel gauge. I looked down. My fuel gauge showed 3/4 full, but that was impossible. I'd been driving for over 3 hours. I should have used at least a 1/4 tank. Probably more given the conditions. What is this? I asked into the CB, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. Where are we? The voice came back. Clearer now. We're between. Keep driving. Between what? No answer. Just static. I drove for what felt like hours. The snow never let up, never changed intensity. The trucks around me never altered their positions. We just moved through that white void, headlights and taillights creating a bubble of red and yellow light in an infinite storm. My clock seemed to be malfunctioning. It would show 7:34 p.m., then the next time I looked, it would be 7:19 p.m., then 7:52 p.m. Time was slipping, non-linear, meaningless. I started seeing things in the snow, shapes that might have been buildings or might have been nothing, shadows of trees that appeared and disappeared. Once I thought I saw a figure standing on the side of the road, watching our convoy pass. But when I looked directly at the spot, there was nothing but snow. The trucks ahead of me started to look strange. Their taillights seemed too bright, too red, like they were glowing from within rather than just reflecting light, and the shapes of the trailers seemed wrong, proportions slightly off, like I was seeing them through a distorted lens. I tried pinching myself, slapping my face, anything to make sure I wasn't asleep and dreaming. But I was awake. This was real, whatever this was. Then I noticed something that made my blood freeze. The truck directly in front of me had a license plate. I could see it clearly in my headlights. It was a Montana plate, old style, the kind they hadn't issued in probably 20 years, and the numbers 0101191, January 1st, 1901, over 100 years ago. I checked the truck beside me. Same thing, an impossible license plate with impossible dates. These weren't modern trucks. They were something else, wearing the appearance of trucks, moving through a storm that might not be a real storm at all. The CB crackled again. You shouldn't be here. Where am I? What is this place? This is the long road. The road between roads, where drivers who never reached their destination still travel. Where the lost ones drive forever, trying to complete journeys that ended long ago. I don't understand. You shouldn't be here, the voice repeated. You're still alive, still real. The storm brought you to us, but you don't belong here. Not yet. How do I get back? When the road allows. When the conditions are right. Until then, you drive with us. You keep going. If you stop, if you pull over, you'll become like us. Permanent. Forever traveling. Never arriving. I don't know how long I drove with that ghost convoy. Hours, days. Time had no meaning in that place. I just kept my hands on the wheel, my eyes on the lights ahead, and tried not to think about what would happen if I ran out of fuel or if my truck broke down. The voice on the CB would occasionally give warnings. Don't look too long at the shadows. If you see exits, don't take them. They don't lead anywhere you want to go. Keep your mind focused on your destination. Remember where you were going. It's your anchor. I focused on Billings. Tried to picture the distribution center where I was supposed to deliver my load. Thought about the route I'd planned. The truck stop where I'd planned to grab breakfast after the delivery. Anything to keep myself connected to reality. To the world I'd left when I'd entered this storm. Then, gradually, things started to change. The snow began to thin. The trucks around me started to fade, becoming transparent, ghostly. I could see through them to the empty road beyond. The truck ahead of me was becoming less solid. I could see its taillights dimming, its shape dissolving into the snow. The truck beside me was already gone, just a faint outline in my peripheral vision. My GPS suddenly came to life, the position marker jumping forward, recalculating. My clock reset, showing 11:47 p.m. I'd lost 7 hours somewhere in that journey. Within minutes, the ghost trucks were completely gone. I was alone on I-90, the snow reduced to light flurries, normal highway stretching ahead. There was a sign. Billings, 87 miles. I'd somehow traveled across South Dakota and well into Montana. Hundreds of miles that should have taken 6 or 7 hours had passed in what felt like much longer, but registered as much less. I pulled into the first truck stop I saw and parked. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn off the engine. I sat there for a long time just breathing, trying to process what had happened. When I finally got out to inspect my truck, everything seemed normal. No damage, no unusual wear. But my fuel gauge still showed 3/4 full, exactly what it had shown when I'd checked it in the convoy. I'd driven hundreds of miles without using any fuel. I made my delivery in Billings the next morning, said nothing about the lost time or the ghost convoy. Who would believe me? But I did ask the receiving clerk if there had been any unusual weather the night before. He looked at me strangely. Last night. No, it was clear. Cold, but clear. No snow at all. The storm I'd driven through, the whiteout conditions that had trapped me with that convoy, apparently never existed in the real world. I've driven I-90 through that stretch many times since then. Never seen the ghost convoy again. But sometimes, when conditions are right, when snow is falling and visibility drops, I see things at the edge of my headlights. Shapes that might be other trucks, running parallel to me on roads that aren't quite there. And I hear that voice occasionally on my CB late at night when I'm driving through remote areas. Keep driving, don't stop. Remember where you're going. It's a reminder that there are roads alongside our roads. Routes that parallel our own but exist in different spaces, different times, and sometimes, when conditions align, when weather or fate or pure chance creates the right circumstances, the boundaries blur. Drivers disappear sometimes. Everyone in the industry knows it. Most are found eventually. Accidents or medical emergencies or deliberate disappearances. But some are never found. No trace, no explanation. I wonder if they found the ghost convoy, if they're still driving through that endless storm, trying to reach destinations they'll never arrive at, traveling forever on the long road between roads. I was lucky. I got out. But I know now that luck might run out someday. One storm too many, one moment of lost focus, and I might find myself back there, back with the convoy that never ends. Until then, I keep driving, I stay alert. And I remember where I'm going. Because forgetting your destination is how you become lost, and on the road between roads, lost means forever. Most long-haul trucks have a sleeper berth behind the driver's seat, a small compartment with a bed where you can rest during long trips. It's your home, away from home on the road, a private space where you sleep, relax, sometimes eat. After years of driving, you get comfortable in that space. It feels safe, familiar, until it doesn't. This happened to me last summer during a series of runs between Phoenix and El Paso. I'd been driving this route for about 2 weeks straight, 3 round trips total, hauling construction materials. It was good money and steady work, so I stayed with it even though the heat was brutal and the route was getting monotonous. The first time I heard the voice, I was parked at a truck stop outside of Tucson. It was around 2 a.m. and I'd pulled in for a 4-hour rest. I'd set my alarm, climbed into the sleeper berth, and was just starting to drift off when I heard it. Breathing. Slow, measured breaths coming from somewhere very close. Like someone was lying next to me in that narrow bed. I froze, listening. The breathing continued, regular and steady, just barely audible over the ambient noise of the truck stop. I reached over slowly, searching the darkness, but my hand found nothing but the wall of the sleeper berth. I turned on my reading light. The sleeper was empty, as I knew it had to be. Just me, my pillow, my blanket. Nowhere for anyone to hide in the small space, but I could still hear it. Breathing, right next to my ear. I got out of the sleeper and checked the entire cab. Doors locked, windows secure, no sign of anyone having entered my truck. Everything was normal. I was alone. I convinced myself I'd been dreaming, that I'd heard my own breathing and my half-asleep mind had distorted it into something else. I climbed back into the sleeper and eventually fell asleep. The next night, parked at a rest area near Lordsburg, New Mexico, I heard it again, but this time it wasn't just breathing. It was whispering. I couldn't make out the words. The voice was too soft, too distorted, like someone speaking through water or from a great distance. But it was definitely words, definitely speech. And it was coming from the sleeper berth, from the space right behind where I sat in the driver's seat. I pulled back the curtain that separated the sleeper from the cab. Nothing there, empty darkness, but the whispering continued. I could hear it even with my head fully in the cab, even though I could see the sleeper was unoccupied. "Who's there?" I asked, feeling ridiculous. "If someone's messing with me, it's not funny." The whispering stopped immediately. Silence filled the truck, broken only by the distant sound of traffic on the highway. I waited for 5 minutes, listening intently. Nothing. I tried to sleep sitting up in the driver's seat that night, but it was uncomfortable, and I barely got any rest. In the morning, I did a thorough inspection of my truck. Checked the sleeper, checked under the truck, checked the trailer. Nothing unusual. I should have reported it to someone. Should have taken the truck to a mechanic, had them look for hidden speakers or some kind of prank device. But I was on a tight schedule, and honestly, I felt embarrassed. What would I say? That I was hearing voices? That my truck was haunted? So I kept driving, kept making my runs between Phoenix and El Paso, and every night when I'd pull over to sleep, I'd hear it. The breathing, the whispering. Sometimes it would last for just a few minutes. Other times it would continue for hours, and gradually I started to understand words. It started with single words, emerging from the general whisper. Tired. Alone. Dark. Then short phrases. So tired. Always alone. Never-ending dark. The voice sounded sad, desperate, like someone in pain. On my 4th trip, parked at a truck stop outside of Deming, New Mexico, I heard a full sentence clearly for the first time. "Please don't leave me here." I sat bolt upright in the sleeper, heart pounding. "Who are you? What do you want?" A pause. Then, "I don't remember. I've been here so long, in the dark. Between the spaces. Please don't leave me here." "Where are you?" "Behind the curtain, behind the wall, in the space between." I turned on every light in my truck. The sleeper was fully illuminated, every corner visible. There was no one there, nowhere anyone could hide. "I can't see you," I said. "I can't see me either. I'm not sure if I'm still real, but I can hear you. I can feel the movement, the engine, the road. It's all I have. Please don't leave me here." Over the next week, I had regular conversations with the voice, always at night, always when I was trying to sleep. It claimed to be a driver named Marcus who had died years ago. He couldn't remember exactly when or how, just that he'd been driving the same route, Phoenix to El Paso and back. He'd fallen asleep at the wheel, somewhere in New Mexico. There had been an accident. I woke up in the dark, the voice told me, behind the curtain, in the space that's not quite space. I've been here ever since, riding in trucks, listening to drivers sleep. Most of them never hear me. You're the first one in a long time who can. Why can I hear you? I asked. Because you're tired. Really tired, deep down. The kind of tired that makes the walls thin, makes the spaces between real and not real easier to cross. You're close to where I am. That frightened me more than anything else. The idea that I was close to whatever liminal space this voice occupied, that my exhaustion was pulling me toward it. How do I help you? I asked. How do I get you out of there? I don't know if you can. I don't know if I can get out. But just don't stop driving this route. Don't stop coming through here. You're the only company I've had in so long, the only one who can hear me. If you stop, I'll be alone again. In the dark. Forever. I didn't know what to believe. Was this a genuine spirit trapped in some impossible space within my truck? A hallucination brought on by exhaustion and isolation? Some kind of psychological breakdown? But whether real or not, the voice's loneliness was affecting me. I found myself talking to it more, telling it about my life, asking about its past. It remembered fragments, a family in Texas, children, though it couldn't remember their names, the satisfaction of a good day's drive, the beauty of desert sunsets. And slowly, I realized that the voice wasn't just keeping me company. I was keeping it company, keeping it sane, keeping it connected to something beyond the dark space where it was trapped. But the situation was taking a toll on me. I wasn't sleeping well, even when the voice was quiet. I was constantly tired, constantly on edge. My performance was suffering. I missed a delivery deadline. I almost fell asleep at the wheel once, caught myself drifting into the other lane. Finally, I made a decision. I told my dispatcher I needed to take a different route for a while. Requested runs in other parts of the country. She was confused, but agreed. That last night in New Mexico, parked at a familiar truck stop, I told the voice what I was doing. I can't keep driving this route, I said. It's not healthy for me. I need to get out of this pattern. Silence from behind the curtain. Then, sus, I understand. I don't want you to end up like me. Trapped. Lost. I'm sorry, I said. I wish I could help you. You did help. You reminded me I used to be real. You gave me conversations, memories, proof that I existed once. That's more than I've had in a long time. Will you be okay? A sad laugh. I don't think okay is something I can be anymore. But I'll persist. I'll wait. Maybe someday another driver will hear me. Maybe someday I'll figure out how to move on. Or maybe I'll just fade away completely. Either way, thank you for hearing me, for talking to me, for treating me like I was still a person. I left New Mexico the next morning and haven't been back. I've been running routes in the Midwest now. Different states, different roads. I sleep better. My performance has improved. I'm not hearing voices anymore. But sometimes, late at night when I'm in my sleeper berth, I think about Marcus. I wonder if he's still there, in that space between spaces, riding in trucks and hoping someone will hear him. I wonder how many other spirits might be trapped in similar, liminal places, caught between the movement of the living world and whatever comes after. And I wonder if he was telling the truth about why I could hear him, if exhaustion really does thin the walls between realities. Because if that's true, then every tired driver on America's highways is potentially close to breaking through. Close to falling into those spaces between spaces where the lost ones wait. I'm more careful now. I follow the regulations about driving hours strictly. I get proper sleep. I take breaks. I stay alert and present. Because I don't want to end up like Marcus. I don't want to wake up one day in the dark, behind a curtain I can't pull back. in a space that's not quite real, waiting for someone to hear my voice. The road takes a lot from drivers: time with family, stability, health. Sometimes it takes even more. Sometimes it takes everything, and what's left is just a voice in the dark, whispering to anyone who might listen. I heard that voice. I talked to it, and it changed how I see this job, this lifestyle, these endless highways that stretch across America. They're not empty. They're full of people who never made it home. Spirits riding in trucks, walking beside highways, waiting at rest stops. The lost ones, the tired ones. The ones who drove just a little too long, pushed just a little too hard, and slipped through the cracks into spaces where they'll drive forever. If you're a driver and you hear something in your sleeper berth, if you catch whispers when you should be alone, pay attention. It might be exhaustion, it might be stress, or it might be Marcus still looking for someone to talk to in the dark. I've been stranded on the side of the road exactly once in my career, and what happened during those 6 hours I spent waiting for help convinced me that some breakdowns aren't mechanical. Some are intentional, like something wanted me stopped in that specific place at that specific time. This was in early October during a run from Nashville to Oklahoma City. Straightforward route, I-40 west, decent weather, no complications expected. I'd fueled up in Nashville before leaving, topped off the tanks completely. With my fuel capacity and the efficiency of my truck, I had more than enough to make it to Oklahoma City with plenty to spare. About 3 hours into the drive, somewhere in western Tennessee near Jackson, I noticed my fuel gauge dropping faster than it should. Not dramatically, but noticeably. I'd used about a quarter tank more than the distance warranted. I figured it was just gauge error, or maybe I'd been working the engine harder than usual without realizing it. I made a mental note to fuel up at the next major truck stop, just to be safe. But the gauge kept dropping. By the time I crossed into Arkansas, I was down to less than a quarter tank, which made no sense given how far I'd driven. I should have had well over half. I started watching for fuel stops, but this stretch of I-40 through Arkansas is pretty sparse. The exits led to small towns with no truck-friendly stations or to nothing at all. I kept driving, getting more concerned as the needle continued its downward progression. Then, in the middle of nowhere between Little Rock and Fort Smith, my engine started to sputter. I was running out of fuel. It shouldn't have been possible. I'd started with full tanks. I'd driven maybe 300 miles. I should have had at least 400 miles of range remaining, but my engine was dying, and the gauge was showing empty. I managed to coast onto the shoulder before the engine quit completely. I sat there for a moment, disbelieving, checking and rechecking my gauges. Empty. Completely empty. I got out and checked for leaks. Inspected the fuel tanks, the lines, everywhere diesel could potentially escape. Nothing. No evidence of leaks, no smell of fuel, no wet spots on the ground. The fuel had simply vanished. I was stranded on a desolate stretch of Arkansas highway with no explanation for how I'd run out of fuel. I called dispatch. They were as confused as I was, but they promised to send a fuel truck to my location. The problem was, I was in the middle of nowhere. The nearest truck with diesel was over an hour away, maybe longer depending on where they were in their route. "Just sit tight," my dispatcher said. "Keep your doors locked. Stay with your truck. Someone will get to you as soon as possible." I settled in to wait. It was mid-afternoon, still plenty of daylight left. Traffic on the highway was light but steady. I wasn't in danger, just inconvenienced. That's what I told myself. But I was wrong. The sun started to set. An hour passed, then 2. I called dispatch again. The fuel truck had been delayed, something about another emergency taking priority. It would be at least another hour, maybe 2. darkness fell. The highway grew quiet. Occasional vehicles passed, their headlights sweeping over me and then disappearing. I tried to read, tried to watch something on my phone, tried to sleep. But I felt uneasy, exposed. Around 9 p.m., about 4 hours into my wait, I noticed a car pulled over on the opposite side of the highway, maybe 100 yards ahead of my position. It was dark, no lights on, just sitting there on the shoulder. I watched it for a few minutes. No one got out, no hazard lights, no sign of activity. Then another car appeared, pulling onto the shoulder about 50 yards behind my truck. Same thing. Dark, no lights, just parked. A third car pulled over on the opposite shoulder, behind the first one. They were surrounding me. 3 vehicles, all dark, all positioned to watch my truck from different angles. My unease turned to fear. I locked my doors, checked that my windows were up. I called 911 and explained the situation. The dispatcher took my information and said they'd send a trooper to check on me, but it would be at least 30 minutes. The cars just sat there, waiting. After about 10 minutes, I saw movement. Someone got out of the car behind me. They stood there for a moment, a dark silhouette in the faint glow of distant highway lights, then started walking toward my truck. I picked up my heavy flashlight, the only weapon I had, and watched them approach in my side mirror. They were wearing dark clothes, face obscured by a hood, moving with deliberate slowness, not hurrying. They reached my trailer and walked along its length, running their hand along the metal. Then they circled around to the passenger side, out of my view from the driver's seat. I twisted around, trying to see where they went. I heard footsteps on the pavement, then a sound that made my blood run cold. Someone trying the passenger door handle, testing it, finding it locked. A face appeared in the passenger window, not pressed against the glass, but hanging back slightly, just outside the range where my cab lights would illuminate it. I could see the outline of features, but no details. They stared at me for a long moment, then moved away. I called 911 again, told them someone was actively approaching my vehicle, that I felt threatened. The dispatcher assured me help was on the way, but I needed to stay in my truck, stay locked in, don't engage. The figure had disappeared from view. I checked all my mirrors, scanning the darkness around my truck. Nothing visible, but I could feel eyes watching me. Then I heard voices, multiple people, talking in low tones just outside my truck. I couldn't make out words, but there were at least 3 or 4 different voices. The people from the cars had gathered around my vehicle. One of them knocked on my door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I didn't respond, didn't move. The knocking came again, harder this time. Then a voice muffled through the door. "We know you're in there. We know you're alone." "Police are on the way," I called back, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've already called 911. You need to leave." Laughter. Multiple people laughing in unison, a sound that was wrong somehow, too synchronized. "You were supposed to run out of fuel here," the voice said. "This spot, this time." It was arranged. "What are you talking about?" "The fuel. We took it while you drove, little by little, siphoning it away. We've been following you since Nashville, waiting for you to stop." That was impossible. You can't siphon fuel from a moving truck. But somehow they had. Somehow they'd been draining my tanks as I drove, forcing me to stop in this specific location. "What do you want?" I asked. "Your cargo. Open the trailer." I looked at my manifest. I was hauling medical supplies, nothing valuable, nothing worth stealing, certainly nothing worth this elaborate setup. "There's nothing valuable in there," I said. "Just medical equipment, not worth anything to anyone but the hospital I'm delivering to." "Open the trailer." "No." The knocking stopped. The voices went silent. For a moment, I thought maybe they'd given up and left. Then every door handle on my truck started rattling at once. Driver side, passenger side, the sleeper berth access. All of them being tested, pulled, jerked. They were trying to force their way in. I laid on the horn, holding it down, filling the night with sound. I flashed my lights, did anything I could to draw attention. A few vehicles on the highway slowed down, probably wondering what was happening, but none stopped. The assault on my doors continued for maybe 2 minutes, then suddenly stopped. Silence. I checked my mirrors. The dark figures were backing away from my truck, moving toward their vehicles. In the distance, I could see flashing lights approaching. The police, finally. The 3 cars pulled away quickly, disappearing into the night before the trooper arrived. By the time he pulled up behind me, lights flashing, I was alone again. The trooper was skeptical of my story. He checked around my truck, found no evidence of anyone having been there. No footprints, no signs of tampering. He suggested I'd been stressed, maybe hallucinating from exhaustion or fear. The fuel truck arrived about 20 minutes later. They put 50 gallons in my tank, and I was amazed when it barely registered on my gauge. My tanks were completely bone dry, even though there was no explanation for how they'd emptied. The driver mentioned that it was strange, my fuel situation. He said he'd been called out to that same stretch of highway 3 times in the past 2 months. Different trucks, different drivers, all reporting the same impossible fuel loss, all stranded in roughly the same area. "I don't know what's going on out here," he said, looking out at the dark highway. "But if I were you, I'd find a different route. Something about this stretch isn't right." I took his advice. I've never driven that section of I-40 through Arkansas again. I take northern routes now, even though they're longer, because I know what I experienced was real. Those people, those dark figures surrounding my truck, they were hunting me. And somehow, impossibly, they'd manipulated my fuel to make me stop exactly where they wanted me. I never found out what they really wanted. What was so important about my cargo that they'd go to such lengths? The medical supplies I was carrying were delivered without incident, nothing unusual about them. But I think about those voices sometimes. You were supposed to run out of fuel here. This spot, this time, it was arranged. Like there's a system, a network of people who target specific trucks, specific drivers, for reasons we'll never understand, who have the ability to manipulate our vehicles, drain our fuel, force us to stop in the places they've chosen. The highway patrol never found those cars. The people I described didn't match any known criminals in the area. It was like they didn't exist, but they do exist. They're out there, watching trucks, following us, waiting for the right moment to strand us in the dark. And I know that somewhere in Arkansas, on a lonely stretch of I-40, they're still waiting, still watching, still draining fuel from passing trucks, waiting for the next driver who'll stop exactly where they want them, waiting for someone who won't get away. Some people think the highway is empty at night, that it's just you and the road and the darkness between towns. But drivers know different. We know the road is full of things that shouldn't be there, shadows in blind spots, voices behind curtains. Convoys of ghost trucks that never stop moving. We know because we've seen them, we've heard them, we've felt them watching us from the darkness as we pass. Not all of us make it home. Some of us become part of the road ourselves, another story whispered between drivers at truck stops, another warning that no one quite believes. But we tell the stories anyway. Because maybe if enough people hear them, maybe if enough drivers stay alert and careful and aware, fewer of us will be lost to whatever hunts us out there. The road is long and dark and full of things that hunger, but we keep driving, because that's what we do. We keep driving even though we know what's waiting in the shadows. We keep driving even when we're scared. We keep driving because someone has to deliver the loads. Someone has to keep America moving, and maybe, just maybe, we'll make it home one more time before the road claims us too. Stay safe out there, drivers. Keep your eyes open. Trust your instincts. And if something feels wrong, if something looks wrong, if something sounds wrong, don't stop. Just keep driving. Because on the long haul, stopping might be the last thing you ever do.